Hello, I'm Neil McDonald. I run Megalithic tours, and this film is going to take us through our Ancient Temples of Megalithic Malta tour. The Mediterranean islands of Malta and Gozo are popular destinations for people seeking sun and sea, but these are special islands in many ways, not least because of their unique history that exists on so many levels, from the Phoenicians, the Romans, the fascinating Knights of St. John, through the British, and now into independence. But before this was the Temple period, when the scene on the Maltese islands took a fundamental leap forward over 5,500 years ago. The Temple saw a way of life that continued for 1,000 years until the islands were suddenly and unexplainedly abandoned around 2500 BC. Then, after a period of 500 years, settlers again arrived and began to build dolmens. Also, at some unknown point around this time, strange and unexplained parallel grooves were cut across the island. These have been known as cart ruts, and we'll have a look at some of these after a walk through some of Malta's main temples. But first we'll pay a visit to Malta's oldest prehistoric site, the Ghar cave. Now here evidence of some strange animals were uncovered during excavation. So as long ago as the Pleistocene period, up to 2 million years ago, the massive forces of climate change continued to affect the Mediterranean and its surrounding land masses. Temperatures were swinging massively from warm to extreme cold, and much of Europe was experiencing periods of glaciation. At this time, a land bridge was formed between Sicily and Malta due to sea ice shifting to a depth of around 800 feet. And the relatively low sea depth between Malta and Sicily of only 300 feet allowed a causeway to develop, providing a passage for animals to the island from the north. With the passage of many thousands of years, the ice melted, causing a re-flooding of the land bridge by around 12,000 BC, trapping animals on the Maltese islands and forcing them to compete for limited food. They had to adapt or become extinct, and this produced some rather unusual fauna and animals, such as giant dormice and tortoises and lizards and giant swans, and pygmy elephants and hippopotamuses. One of the most spectacular temples on Malta is the Hagar Qim. This has a usual flattened oval forecourt that stretches the whole length of the temple, and also has the usual concaved facade. Above the low-lying bench, the stones of the front elevation are perfectly worked and cut to fit, with a row of upright stones or orthostats face on, with 2 rows of horizontal stones above and a trilithon door breaking through. The basic temple design is that of an ace of clubs, with an apse to each side of the portal entrance, and one so-called terminal apse after these to the centre. In most of the temples, this design has been adapted and developed, and this now is the ground plan of the Hagar Qim Temple. Passing through the trilithon entrance, both side apses would have been partitioned off, with doors like this called portholes, that probably would have held wooden blocks that would have been tied off through the notches. It was also in this area that this stone, decorated with pitting and double spirals, was found, together with this small altar-like table of 4 sides, again with pitting and with a flower or tree design. This rear apse has a hole in the outer wall, which leads through to an external shrine. A favourite theory of mine is this is an oracle hole that allows communication through from a priestly person in the apse through to this external shrine. The external shrine stands next to this huge megalith that weighs in at 20 tons. It stands at 6.5 meters high. This is the shrine here, and you can see to the right, this is the oracle hall that leads through to the inner apse. Just out to sea from Hagar is the tiny islet of Filfa. Down a gentle slope are the temples of Mnajdra, sitting on a coastal shelf below. The usual forecourt, this time of around 30 metres, stretches across 3 temples standing in a straight line. The smallest temple to the right, or north, is of the basic trefoil design and is the oldest, dating back from the Ggantija period, as long ago as 3600 BC. Passing through the southwest facing portal with its flanking orthostats and toba flooring, you can see the central or terminal mini-apse sectioned off with pitted orthostats. Although still of the Ggantija period, the south temple, standing far left of the forecourt, was the second to be constructed here. There's a striking convex facade constructed of faced-on orthostats above a well-preserved bench, and beneath 1 or 2 rows of now haphazardly positioned horizontal layered slabs. Through the entrance trilithon, you pass over an interesting crystalline inlet at the threshold. It's here that the sun shines through to fix the equinox sunrise, lighting up pitted slabs to either side of the temple centre. In this apse to the front right, you have the usual large vertical orthostats with horizontal layers corbelling into what might have been the base of some sort of roof. There are also a couple of oracle holes leading to an outer area reached by 3 steps. The central temple here appears to have been squeezed in between the other 2 temples. You can see that a stone platform had to be built and levelled out for this temple. And here is the entrance portal, unusually with 2 separate doorways, the one to the right being a porthole. The 2 frontal apses are relatively clear and straightforward, with walls completely constructed of orthostats, topped off with 2 layers of horizontal slabs. Along the central passageway that divides the front and the rear apses are these 2 small chambers, and it's here that this small carving can be found showing a completed temple, complete with roofing, adding to the debate about temple roofing. In the rear apses, there's this small chamber with a portal entrance built into the thickness of one of the temple walls. And there's also this chamber-type structure which forms the terminal apse. There are large water cisterns cut out of the limestone plateau above the temples, which must have been used as a facility for them. There are up to 10 tanks here of different sizes with openings of up to 4 meters and also the depth of again of 4 meters. These must have provided a fine water supply that could have been captured during the rainy season in winter to supply the temples below during the summer months. There are grooves carved into the rock, acting as drains directing the water supply into the tanks. The Tarxien Temples are not so pleasing to look at, but this complex grew over hundreds of years, making it one of the largest and most impressive of those in Malta. The site's various stages of development produce many interesting facets, some quite unique. Entering through the portal, the sight of the interior of the first 2 apses would have provided a real wow factor, as this was the most decorated area of any of the Maltese temples. To the right of the entrance stands the remains of an immense statue that would have stood up to 3 meters in height, dominating the interior space. It would have definitely caught the gaze of anyone entering the temple, with its elaborately carved stone spiral platforms. Next to the so-called Maltese Fat Lady statue is a stone altar standing on a hollowed-out stone plinth, decorated with 2 levels of spirals, broken with a lower central bunged hole. On excavation, Zammit found this plinth to be full of animal bones, shells and flint knives, probably left over from ceremonies carried out on this block. Many of the carved blocks to be found in the Tarxien Temples are replicas, but the originals can be found here in the Museum of Archaeology in Valletta. Moving into the central apse, this amazing and huge carved bowl was incredibly formed out of one single piece of stone. In another small chamber, you see wonderful carvings of two bulls and a sow, probably chipped out of the rock with a stone axe more than 5,000 years ago. Another point of interest here is the staircase that is built between the central and the eastern temples, posing the question as to why anyone would wish to get to the higher level. Could it have been to access the roof or for a viewing area? Of course, we'll never know. Outside the front of the temple are these enigmatic stone balls of various sizes up to 0.5 metre in diameter. They're of uncertain usage, although there is a theory that they acted as rollers to move the megalithic stones into position. And these are thought to be tethering holes that may have been used for securing animals awaiting sacrifice. The Hagret Temple is a brilliant and visually pleasing sight. It still has its forecourt and this spectacular and complete trilithon entrance with the 3 steps leading up to it. It's of a basic trefoil design with walls of roughly hewn stone blocks, still of up to 3 metres in height. The entrance portal leads through to this rectangular stone paved area of around 2.5 by 4.5 metres, with a slightly raised cobbled surround. It was in this area that this small carved model of a temple was found, depicting a roof of crossbeams supported on narrow corbelling. This suggests that at least some of the temples may have had wooden beamed roofs. Hagret's sister site, Skorba, is nearby. It hasn't survived quite so well, but there are still a couple of interesting features that are very important at Skorba. This large stone paving slab lying before the entrance is probably the best example of libation holes. This is a repeating feature at many of the temples. And here are the floors and single wall linings of 2 oval buildings that are amongst the oldest man-made settlement buildings in Malta. So for our last temple visit, we're going to catch the ferry for the short crossing across to the island of Gozo. boundary wall at the Ggantija Temple is one of the most impressive sights on the Maltese islands. The wall was built using the tough coralline limestone with some massive examples of up to 6 metres in length and weighing in at over 50 tons, raising the height of the wall to over 6 metres. The wall shows the method of construction known as long and short work, whereby the main megalithic blocks were laid intermittently side on and edge on to tie the wall together. The spaces between the outer boundary and the inner temple walls were filled with rubble, providing extra stability. But Ggantija is one of the most amazing temples, with a concave facade that unfortunately has a collapsed middle section that spoils what would have been an amazing view of these 2 huge freestanding temples. The forecourt area to the front of the temples stretches 30 metres across the whole of the structure, an area that would have provided a meeting space for hundreds of people to gather. As the temples are located on the edge of a plateau, the forecourt is supported and raised by terracing, and beyond is a panoramic view across the valley and out over the island. The entrance to the original southern 5 apse building is dominated to its left by a massive wall of over 7 metres high, held into its original position now by scaffolding. The terminal apse of this same temple is equally high and well maintained enough to make out evidence of corbelling, suggesting some sort of roof. Internal fittings at Ggantija are quite scarce, but this is a fine example of a triple table with dividing upright megaliths to be found in the apse next to the terminal apse. This second temple to the north was added by removing a huge portion of the surrounding boundary wall, building the temple and then rebuilding the wall around it. During excavation of the temples, many different statues were found, some with holes for apparently interchangeable heads. But by far the star of the show is the exquisite Sleeping Lady. This masterpiece was found in the Hypogeum, a vast burial and ceremonial area on 3 levels that dates back to at least 4000 BC. The small oracle room here, with its incredible red ochre painted ceilings, stands out because it takes any voice spoken into it and reverberates it throughout the whole cavern. Standing on a hill in the centre of the island is Medina, the silent city, the old fortified capital of the islands, and next to this, in the connected town of Rabat, on the hillside, are ancient catacombs. St. Paul's catacombs are a vast complex that began with the Phoenicians in the 9th century BC, after they built Medina as their capital. The area grew under the Romans and then the Byzantine Christians, both of which needed a safe burial area on the edge of the city. Towards the coast from Medina are the Clapham Junction court ruts. This area is magnificent, it is huge, and it covers a whole hillside. It gets its name from the way that the ruts cross each other and separate like railway points. But what were these enigmatic grooves for? When were they carved and how? They produced so many questions. Were they a result of the temple building? Well, evidence would suggest not. Maybe they were the result of trade movement. Well, if so, why so many concentrated at Clapham Junction? What sort of vehicle could move along these tracks with such a high central rise? The cart ruts are an interesting subject of study in their own right, but will we ever really know the answers? So that brings us to the end of our film about the ancient temples of magical Malta tour. There are many more aspects of these islands to discover, so please do come and visit us at www.megalithictours.com, where you will find a list of all our tours.